Today, we're going to talk about the incredible life of Nelson Mandela. His journey is just this epic story of hope and courage, taking him from a small village all the way to the world stage. It really is a story that didn't just change a country, it inspired the entire world. So let's dive in.
Mandela himself once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And wow, if that doesn't sum up his life, I don't know what does. He was up against things that seemed completely unbeatable, but he just never, ever gave up. It's such a great reminder, right? That what seems impossible today might just be possible tomorrow if you keep pushing.
And that really leads us to the big question here. How did one man's journey, filled with so much struggle and sacrifice, actually manage to change the future of an entire nation? How did he go from being labeled a troublemaker to becoming a global hero?
Okay, so our story doesn't start in some grand political hall. Nope, it begins in a quiet little village in South Africa. This is where a future leader was born, into a world that was already deeply, deeply unfair.
Now, get this. He was born Rolihlahla Mandela, and in his native language, Xhosa, that name has a colloquial meaning, troublemaker. How's that for foreshadowing? It was like he was destined from birth to shake things up and challenge the status quo.
You know, the person he became was really shaped by the people around him. From his father, he learned that being a leader means serving others, not yourself. His mother taught him about kindness and faith. And later, his guardian, Chief Jungantaba, showed him what responsibility and tradition really meant. These ideas became the absolute foundation for everything he did later in life.
Mandela truly believed that education was the key to changing everything. He was so committed to this idea that when his family arranged a marriage for him that would have cut his studies short, he made a huge decision. He ran away to the big, bustling city of Johannesburg to chase his dream of becoming a lawyer.
So he gets to Johannesburg, and it's here that his personal dreams collide with a much, much bigger fight. He comes face to face with the ugly, brutal reality of a system that would come to define his entire life's work.
And that system was called apartheid. We're not just talking about prejudice here. This was a legal system of racial segregation written into law. It decided where you could live, what job you could have, everything, all based on the color of your skin. It was oppression by design.
The reality of apartheid was just stark. It created two completely different worlds. On one side, white South Africans had all the rights and privileges. On the other, black South Africans were pushed to the margins, denied the right to vote, to own land, or to have any real dignity. The injustice was everywhere, every single day. So what do you do when you're faced with that? Well, Mandela acted. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC. Then he co-founded its more fiery youth league. He started organizing protests and strikes. And, fulfilling his dream, he and his friend Oliver Tambo opened the very first black-led law firm in the country, fighting the system from the inside.
At first, their whole strategy was built on nonviolence. They were really inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, organizing boycotts, marches, strikes. They truly believed they could peacefully convince the government to change.
But that hope for a peaceful path was shattered. In 1960, in a township called Sharpeville, police opened fire on a crowd of peaceful, unarmed protesters. 69 people were killed. The event was just horrifying, and it sent shockwaves of pure outrage across the globe. For Mandela and the ANC, Sharpeville was the final straw. It was proof that peaceful protest just wasn't enough. The government responded by banning the ANC altogether. So they were forced to go underground and form an armed wing called Spear of the Nation, shifting their fight to acts of sabotage.
Well, this new direction made Mandela public enemy number one in South Africa. And eventually, he was captured. But going to prison didn't put out the fire. In fact, it was in that harsh, unforgiving place that the leader we all know was truly forged.
When he was captured and put on trial, Mandela used the courtroom as his stage. He stood up and gave this incredible, defiant speech, saying he was willing to die for his dream of a free and democratic society. His words were powerful. He was sentenced to life in prison.
27. For 27 years, Nelson Mandela was a political prisoner. Just let that number sink in. Almost 3 decades of his life, gone. Most of that time was spent on the notorious, desolate Robben Island. And life there was brutal. We're talking a tiny cell, hard labor in a quarry, and almost no contact with the outside world. One visitor, one letter, every 6 months. But here's the amazing thing.
He refused to be broken. He turned that prison into what they called Mandela University. He studied, he taught other inmates, and he even learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, so he could understand them better.
Through all those dark years, he found strength in a poem called Invictus. The last lines became his personal motto, a reminder that even if his body was in chains, his spirit was still free. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Just incredible.
Now, while Mandela was locked away, a huge global movement was growing, demanding his freedom. And finally, after years of international pressure, he was released. But his biggest challenge was actually still ahead of him, figuring out how to heal a nation torn apart by decades of hate.
What happened next was just a blur of history in the making. In 1990, he walks free, and the world celebrates. 4 years later, boom, he's elected the first black president in the country's first ever real democratic election. And then in 1995, he does something genius. He unites the whole country, black and white, by getting behind the national rugby team during the World Cup.
So how did he do it? How did he bring everyone together? I mean, after 27 years in prison, most people would have wanted revenge. But Mandela chose something much harder and much more powerful: forgiveness. He knew that holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. The only way forward was reconciliation.
Mandela served one term as president and then became this beloved global statesman, sort of a moral compass for the entire world. His journey offers these timeless lessons that aren't just for South Africa, but really for all of us.
So, what can we take away from his life? He taught us that courage isn't about not having fear. It's about doing it anyway. He showed us that forgiveness is a strength, a powerful weapon against hate. And I love this one. I never lose. I either win or learn. He proved that one person's dedication really can change the world, and that we should never, ever stop trying to build a better future.
We'll end on this powerful idea from Mandela because it applies to every single one of us. True greatness isn't about avoiding failure or never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. That's a testament to the human spirit, and it's a lesson that still inspires people all over the world today.